Now, the new boss of the failed cryptocurrency exchange FTX says the company used customer funds to buy employees' homes in the Bahamas. FTX filed for bankruptcy last week. Its founder, Sam Bankman-Fried, resigned as chief executive. New CEO John Ray III led the liquidation of the energy company Enron. He describes the collapse of FTX as a complete failure of corporate control. Well, let's bring in Peter Andersen in Boston. He's the Chief Investment Officer of Andersen Capital Management. Peter, before this whole collapse, I believe Bankman-Fried was lobbying in Washington for a regulatory framework for crypto. Now he has admitted that was just PR. How do you start trying to regulate a sector like this?
It is a very, very serious matter, and, it is a very fluid situation. So the news is breaking almost every hour about the rolling disclosure that investigators are discovering. So I don't think we're even halfway through discovering all the malfeasance that has occurred, and we're still trying to figure out the whole positioning of Mr. Bankman-Fried and the losses to investors. So even as we report this, I expect even worse news to come for the following hours and days.
In terms of looking at the sector, though, there's been a lot of criticism around whether or not governments should have more oversight. We obviously saw cryptocurrency really take off during the pandemic. Is this a case, then, of regulatory bodies needing to try to catch up?
Oh, I think it's a case of many factors. Certainly, the regulatory bodies do have to weigh in on this. And the crypto business itself got way ahead of the regulatory pacing. And that caused a lot of misunderstanding for investors that were not really educated in such a difficult investment instrument. The instrument itself is probably the most complicated investment instrument that we have created to date. So imagine that with no regulatory oversight and a pandemic when people were very curious and enthusiastic about investing, and you have this disastrous result where it's, as we say, almost like the Wild West, where there is no regulatory action. People that have created a lot of these cryptocurrencies have no appreciation for financial management. Many of them come from other backgrounds, such as computer science or physics, and they're not educated or trained to understand and appreciate the rules that are in place and, frankly, the ethics that are in place to protect investors.
Well, I see that Bankman-Fried is now also saying that FTX was potentially hacked, possibly also by a former employee. Does that reflect just how vulnerable the sector is when it comes to security as well?
It is extremely surprising to a lot of crypto supporters that it could be hacked. If you recall, when crypto was first paraded out as an attractive investment, one of the features that the supporters of crypto said was that it was very secure and was not subjective, not vulnerable to hacking. So it's rather ironic that during this stressful phase, on top of all this confusing, trying to unwind what has happened, the fact that it has been hacked actually defeats one of the main selling points of crypto, which is it was supposed to be incredibly secure. And another point on that, as we have followed crypto, many of the supporters have changed their descriptions as to why it is an attractive investment. If you recall, the first one of the major points was that it was much more secure, but also that it was a hedge against inflation, that it was a storage of value, and we are seeing that none of those issues is correct.
Well, I'm interested, Peter, sorry, I'm curious because we're talking here about trust and also about ethics. I believe the run on FTX was triggered partly by comments from a rival crypto exchange. How vicious is competition within the sector?
Well, I think that shows the immaturity, frankly, of the people that are running crypto organizations. Many of them are in their late 20s, early 30s, and as I said, don't have a sense of decorum for how you communicate about investments. And when you don't have that sense of decorum and self-discipline, what you see now is kind of a raw disclosure of the nasty phrases and sentences that each other is accusing the parties. And so that is a very unusual feature, again, of this whole spectacular failure, is that we are seeing raw transcriptions of the communications.
Very interesting. A story we'll continue following here on Al Jazeera. Peter Andersen, they're the Chief Investment Officer of Andersen Capital Management. Great to get your insight on Al Jazeera. Thanks for joining us, Peter.
You're welcome.